Right, I will call this meeting of the New West Police Board to order. Start with the land recognition. We recognize and respect that New Westminster is on the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Halkmulum speaking peoples. We acknowledge that colonialism has made invisible their histories and connections to the land. As a city, we're learning and building relationships with the people whose lands we're on. Adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes to make? Good. Would anyone like to pull? No, we'll just do that. Can someone move to adopt the
Second.
Consent agenda? Would anyone like to pull something off consent? Mary,
Can I pull 2.4, please? The Operation Support Bureau report.
Yeah. we're good. Okay, can someone move adoption of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? All opposed, carried. Awesome. Okay, 2.4, Mary.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the situation table that's referred to in the report. I hope it's this report. 2.4, right? Is it in this report or is it in the? Yeah, it should be. I guess I just wondered what occurs at that meeting and the people that attend that meeting. I just wanted to know a little bit more about it, if that's okay.
Yeah, who should I pass? Is that you?
Yeah, there's two different types of tables. There's the situation table, then there's a steering committee table.
Mhm.
So I've only been to one situation table itself. Ryan Long was the one who went to the first one. Sorry, give me a sec here.
I found it in the report under the presentation meeting trainings on April 8th and 15th. We attended the situation table. So I just wanted to understand. I've heard a little bit about
Yeah,
it, but I just
yeah.
wanted to understand more. If you don't have it today, that's
Yeah.
fine. It's not urgent, but I just would like to know more about it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Should we do that? Do you want to send us a note or an email with?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
About that?
Yeah, and that way I can get back to you on kind of where it's currently at. The last meeting was canceled, so I wasn't able to attend on that one. There's another one scheduled for next week in which we'll see what's happening there. So, and the first time I went, I mean, it's a roundtable of different people with mental health unit and the city, the crisis response team, and you know, they're sharing problem situations, you know, and then similar to other committees, depending on the level of interaction, who needs to know what is when further information disclosures will happen. So, but yeah, it'd be tough for me to say just because I haven't been to a recent one, but I've been planning to go, but the last one again was canceled. So, and the steering committee, I'm also looking to get an update on. Part of this is because we're going through a transition between the gap in our inspector position right now that normally would oversee that. So I will send you an update about that.
Okay,
to the board.
great. Thank you. And I have one other question.
Sure, but I can also fill you in a little bit about from.
Sure.
Because I'm the city's liaison for the Building Safer Communities
Mhm.
project. So that was an initiative. The situation table was started focused on youth around gun and gang prevention, like out of that funding pool from the Ministry of, from the feds, but then we also got an additional grant from the Ministry of Public Safety. And so the idea of the table is to bring together sort of everyone who might be connected to youth who are struggling and sort of in urgent care. And so schools or whomever, nonprofit organizations, and anyone, police, whoever's at the table can bring forward the name of a youth who needs like urgent triage. You know, this youth is experiencing homelessness or got kicked out of their house, or this happened, and like then everybody they meet weekly. And so then they can triage and figure out a game plan for them. It's been, I think, pretty well received in the community as like instead of having to, make 1,000 calls, everybody's there. And then there's also a lot of information sharing that's been helpful. For example, someone might say, we haven't seen this youth at school in 2 weeks, and then, all of a sudden, actually, they've been arrested, something has happened. And so there's a bit more information sharing just about like the overall context for these young people. So, yeah.
Is it just youth?
That table is just youth. The city is looking at creating one like more broadly for adults, but we don't have that.
And is it youth like up to sort of school age only?
Up to 25,
Oh, 25, okay,
but
Okay.
primarily I would say that it's focused. School
Okay.
age.
okay, cool, thank you, I appreciate that. My other question was around Pat. And it seems to me this report is highlighting relationships potentially that we have with other organizations in the city. And so I feel like we talk about PAC sort of here and there, but I thought it was going to be added to a regular reporting. So we could see what kind of regular interactions we have with PAC if we do. And so I'm just wondering, is this the place to add that information, or is there a better way for us to report out on that relationship and those interactions?
I think, number one is I'll assess, what data we have here that shows our interactions with Pat.
Okay,
Then also compare that to, I can reach out to PACT and then see what data they have, because I know they, obviously, when you saw the presentation that they
Yeah.
did. So I can compare the two and then see what is the best way to report on that. But I would suggest that we go with this report, would be the appropriate place.
okay, I think it would be good for us to see it on a regular basis. I know they get calls direct, so we don't see everything that occurs, but I think there's lots of overlap in our work. So I would really like to know more about how we are interacting with PAC and sort of what that relationship looks like.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you. But that's all I have. is this, for receipt or something? I can move receipt if we need to.
Sure.
Yes, please.
Second, right, all in favor? It's carried, excellent. Ongoing business, the chief constable.
Thank you. I just want to start with my updates. First of all, we're just publicly acknowledging the Lapu tragedy that happened a number of weeks back. Obviously, tremendous tragedy, not only for the Filipino community, but obviously the larger community as well. It's generated obviously a lot of conversation, both externally and internally in the police world. We have had internal conversations. We have reached out to our local Filipino community as well to offer any support as needed. And also just again, us looking at our own internal process. Obviously, we have a number of community events in the community as well. And our expectation is obviously that those events are conducted in a manner that maximizes public safety. We have a fairly, again, robust program. We actually have several of our senior staff away right now doing some of that training. So it's just again to kind of acknowledge the tragedy and acknowledge for the community that it's something that we will be looking at as well to make sure again that we're maximizing our public safety profile with all events that are conducted in the community. With regards to just some of the events that I've attended and engaged with over the last month, I did engage with the Brow Hill Residents Association, the topics that we dealt with primarily around traffic and crime-related issues. I met with staff at the Last Row Recovery House, had a very great conversation around there about anything we can do to assist or support them. Also attended the Tourism New West launch of their new marketing campaign, which is very exciting for them. And they also engaged with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, the chapter that represents BC and Yukon. So what they're looking to do is, what they're engaged in with is offering experiences for children or youth that are suffering or experiencing challenging medical conditions. Obviously, they actually explain this themselves. You often hear them going to Disneyland or these kind of things, but there's actually quite a need or desire for some of these kids to actually engage with first responder communities. So they've reached out to us. I believe we're probably one of the first police agencies that they want to engage with. And I've made it clear to them that we're happy to engage with them in any which way we can to support their children. I might have these numbers wrong, so I apologize, but I believe in BC alone, there's over 600 kids on the wait list for various experiences. So anything we can do to support them, we're going to do. And I'm also trying to engage them at the provincial level so that they have an expanded access to other areas. I just want to talk a little bit about, and we'll probably get into it with new business, the subject behavior response report and use of force report. These reports were originally gonna be kind of combined. We thought we'd separate them out because while they have some similar data, they are very distinct, and we can talk about that or tease that out a bit if it's requires further explanation. I just want to flag again publicly, the SBR report cites about 820 use of force incidents over the last since 2018 through 2014. During that same period of time, our members attended or dealt with probably 130,000 operational files. So there's some level of use of force less than 1%, about 0.6% of the time in the files that we're engaging on. And then I just wanted, again, just publicly speak a little bit about the downtown core. We've seen a slight uptick in some of our stats. Assaults are up slightly, 6%, I believe, and thefts are up as well. We had a very significant incident downtown where a woman pushing her child, her toddler, was seriously assaulted by an individual who did not know her, and there's no connection. There was a stranger assault. Based on some of this, we are increasing our downtown exposure, our downtown foot patrol primarily. We still have enough significant amount of funding from the site program, approximately $30,000 that remains. So we're supplementing that a little bit as well. We're going to be doing that for the balance of May and reassessing at the end to see how things are going. Again, with the summer months, we do see increased activity in the downtown core and in the park area, Westminster Pier Park. So we want to make sure that we do have a presence down there and that we're mitigating any challenging behavior and it doesn't kind of take root in the downtown core. So we will be doing that over the next month or so and then reassessing from there. And then I just flagged that as well. You probably will see the board will see some increase in overtime with regards to that. And also just some patrol shortages that we're trying to manage through regarding ensuring we are meeting our minimum staffing requirements on patrol. Those are my updates.
Alejandro.
So one of my questions, like I think that having more police presence is important, but then when we go and apprehend someone and they are out like 2 hours later, so what can we do or how, or like,
That is a frustration that I think is felt by not only myself and the team, but also by line officers when they are engaging in, making an arrest. There was one we had recently where it was a subject, he was arrested 3 times for some troubling behavior and kept getting released. It is somewhat outside of our hands at the local level. There is a lot of advocacy work that occurs at the BC Chiefs level about bail reform, and I do believe that governments are listening and engaged on this issue. Public safety, as we know, is very important, and it's trying to find that balance between, respecting someone's right to be presumed innocent when they're arrested versus if you're a public safety risk, and you demonstrated that over a repeated period of time. So yeah, that is a frustration. I do hear that from members where they're seeing it, or they're seeing an individual that potentially poses some level of a public safety risk. They're unmanaged in the community. They're arrested. They're now into the criminal justice stream, and they're out very quickly. Sometimes they have conditions that can be managed in the community. Sometimes it's not. Oftentimes we end up rearresting them for breach of those conditions as well. So we do share some of that frustration.
Follow-ups? This is easy. Okay, new business. You're not off the hook. There we go.
Sorry.
Q1 2025.
Yeah, so for the Q1 update, this is the first kind of round of forecast for 2025. So right now the year-to-date budget is pretty much on target at about $1,000 surplus. But we are expecting that to sort of the positive variance to continue throughout the year. It is a first round of estimates. There's a lot of things that could happen. We need some different pricing to come in for our integrated teams, but right now I am forecasting about a $1.2 million variance. So any specific line questions?
Positive.
It's
I
not,
mean, good news.
Good news, bad news.
Yeah.
it's not great news because that means that we're short
Yes,
a number of
yes. of
staffing
course.
and we will see that reflected in the overtime. I did put in what I thought was a fairly robust buffer in the overtime, but I think that might not have been enough.
Yeah, I think it speaks again to, I think salaries and benefits probably represent 80% of our budget. And, we see slippage in these areas, it's generally because we're, not holding vacancies, but we have vacancies on the sworn and civilian side. So it's something we're very alive to. It's an organizational priority. The recruiting team, we have reassigned a sergeant in there to assist with that on the sworn side and also with the civilian hiring. Again, the challenge is just the number of seats that go through the JIBC. That is limited, it's restricted. So we do have to look at other areas, including hiring of experienced police officers. So again, that's the team. They are engaged. We're looking at kind of an enhanced marketing campaign moving forward as well to attract those individuals. And again, utilizing our own staff. I mean, our own staff are our best recruiters. They understand the organization. They understand what we're looking for. So really engaging with them and hoping that they can bring in people. There is just, and this isn't news to anybody, there is a significant strain on policing resources right across the country. We're seeing fewer and fewer people interested in policing or applying for policing, while at the same time, people leaving the profession for a variety of reasons. The local context, again, we have a new municipal police agency across the Fraser River that is trying to upscale in a rapid fashion. So we have lost some members to that organization, which presents some challenges because I don't know what I don't know. I don't know if there's members walking out the door in a month. So to try and plan for that is very challenging. So we're going to do our best to address those issues. The other thing we're also looking at is, if we continue to see some of these staffing challenges, is what is our staffing or our service delivery model look like? Do we have to stop going to certain calls? Again, we're not no call too small, but we're pretty close to that. I think that's the community has that expectation that, if they phone us, we're going to attend and address the issues at hand. But we may need to revisit that if these kind of challenges continue. I'm very mindful of the burnout rates that we saw in our last wellness survey. And I've committed to the watches. They're all running short now, that we will use overtime to supplement them so that they're able to access their leave when they have it. We're able to access training as they need it. And we're able to provide other services, they get out and do training or extra things that they're required to do. So they're not just constantly being ground down, responding to calls for service.
Drew.
I'm just wondering, yeah, it's good and bad news, but if we're, and it's early in the year, but if we're looking at 1.2 million positive variants, are there things that we should be starting to identify that perhaps we should be investing in sooner than later? Like, is there equipment that we know is coming? Or essentially, is there a list? I know there were things last year as well. Like, I think we talked about some IT security issues that we weren't really dealing with, but we probably should do. Are there some of those sort of one-time costs that we should be starting to identify and prioritize for action a little bit further down the road if it's still trending towards that large of a surplus?
So yeah, we've had those very high level conversations. Obviously, a $1.2 million variance is extremely high. It's probably, I'm gonna guess, 3%. But yes, to answer your question, certainly we'll be looking at other areas of things that maybe we're looking to deal with down the road.
We have a couple of things that we have done the first quarter is, I don't know if you noticed, but we did refresh all the painting. This is usually, my understanding, something that it goes under our facility budget for the city, but they just didn't have the capacity to take it on. So we sort of went through and we did a refresh. Equipment is a great idea, Drew. I think that bring that back for another discussion.
Yeah, just whatever those one-time costs
Yeah.
are that we can identify.
Thanks. I think, Jacqueline, we've talked about reserves. Have we?
We do not.
Are we
at the
allowed?
city, we're not allowed to do a reserve, no.
I thought we talked about having some kind of emergency.
Reserve, yeah.
Yeah,
There hasn't been an appetite to do that, because I think it's kind of, it's a two-way street. So then if we get into a position where we do have a reserve, what happens if we have a major file or something happens that we don't have the reserve to cover it? Then like, we have a great relationship with the city, and I don't think we've gotten to a point where we need to worry so much about that. But if there was something we need to put it aside or take care of this year, I think that is a good
I mean, the
idea.
reason I ask is because we're sort of in the business of unexpected
Yeah.
situations, right? I mean, we've talked about legal being way more than we've anticipated. I just wonder what the value of having some reserves for OT or legal or things when we have this much of a bulk?
Yeah, I think, well, we can definitely.
I mean, I don't
bring it
know,
Back to city finance and discuss with them.
but can
again,
you
just-
clarify why we have to go to the city? I don't understand that. Why do we have to talk to the city about that?
I think it's just, as it stands now, so if we have a positive variance, I think as long as I've been around, it's
That's how-
always been a positive variance.
That's
to
how
the
it funds
development.
our capital budget for the most part at the city.
Yeah.
It's our, any surplus that we have and feeds in to funding capital projects.
Our capital projects.
The city's capital projects.
Okay,
It goes back into their reserves.
It goes
basically,
back
any
into their
variance.
general reserve.
And if we would run into this situation where we're in a negative variance, the city would have to cover that out of the reserves, because the bills have to get paid.
right,
Um,
okay.
So it's an ongoing thing, but I don't think it's a conversation we can certainly have. There are other organizations, as I understand it, that do have some level of reserve, even something like they put some amount of money away for serious events, like a kidnapping investigation.
Mhm, where you have-
$200,000.
Exactly,
Easy.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking about, like those kinds of things that we can't plan for, but generally do happen at some point. And really impact our budget in the year. And it's also hard to budget for those things because we also don't know if they're gonna happen, so it would be, I think, helpful to have something set aside.
Of course, yeah.
But
We can have this
Certainly, we can
conversation,
certainly
yeah.
have that conversation with the city.
I don't know what the rest of the board looks like, but I just
I
think
mean, I
it's,
kind of feel like if it's 6 to 1, half dozen to the other, if we have this. If there's a strong working relationship with the city for those unexpected costs, they're gonna cover, like, if that wasn't the case.
but what if
it might-
we didn't? Or what if
Sure.
the city didn't have that available? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's unlikely, but still, it feels like this is our budget that we are managing.
Mhm.
So we should have some level of control over a surplus that may support us when we have things that occur that are unexpected. And they obviously have to be stated what they're for. I don't know, I just think,
I worry a little bit though. like,
Yeah.
It sounds like we have a good relationship with the city on sort of that back and forth right now.
Yeah.
If we start to carve off that we have this reserve,
yeah,
we could get to a point down the road where the city's like, well, you can manage your own reserve, it's your problem, suck it up.
Right.
Rather than the sort of back and forth happening.
yeah,
I'm not for or against it. just
No,
just
I-
worry that
it's-
that might be.
yeah, I think it's,
Right now,
we
it
should
sounds like
consider
it's
it
quite
all,
collaborative, and I think Jack is a big reason for that.
yeah.
But I just worry that that could become a dynamic if we start to separate it and say, well, manage your own reserves.
Yeah. Heather's got her hand up.
I'll go Kelsey then Heather. And does Heather want to respond directly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, for me also, like what I worry about is if the city's getting our surplus back, like they have less need to like critique like the budget, but if let's say we started to build a reserve, and they notice that, they might say like, you guys always are over budget by, I don't know, 300,000, we're gonna cut it back. So I think like having that because we rely on getting the budget for them, I'm more I have a preference towards giving them the surplus back so that it's more collaborative in our development, where they don't think we're padding it to build their reserve.
That's fair too.
We can have the conversation.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to
Support
know
the-
what's sort of best practice for us. Keeping in mind that sort of odd relationship that we have with them, but
Yeah, I think we did a scan of the number of municipal police forces, and there was just one that.
Has a reserve.
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Just curious.
Okay, I had a couple of things, so maybe if it's okay, I'll just ask my questions.
Yeah, go
Okay, just a comment on what Drew said. I think similarly, as we get more confident in our projections, it would be nice to assess what strategic priorities we could support this year that we may not have thought we would be able to. So love to revisit that conversation. A couple of like things that jumped out at me that I was curious about are Jacqueline, you noted that we've seen a significant reduction in seconded members, and it seems like that's projected to sort of be our steady state. I'm just wondering, just generally, like, why is that, and what are we potentially seeing as the impacts, like, on department morale? I know that secondment, or I understood when I joined the police board that secondment was a really positive sort of attribute of our department. So I'm curious about that. And then a really sort of small in the weeds thing. I was just wondering what we actually budgeted for the patrol review. I think there was a comment that it was, like we were over budget in that one area just because of the patrol review. So I just didn't know what we budgeted
So
for that.
we were gonna fund the patrol review from our existing, consulting and setting budget. So we knew we would likely be over on that. We didn't do a one-time increase for the patrol review.
Okay, it was just gonna be absorbed, basically.
We were thinking, I think that we were able to do a little bit last year, kind of span the 2 years and we could buffer, but it didn't quite work out that way.
Okay, and then one more question that probably Paul, you might be a bit better placed to answer. It's sort of related to finances, but I think just thinking about the recruitment challenges that we're seeing. I'm also starting to hear now recruitment ads for the Calgary Police Department. Which is concerning. I'm just wondering if we're starting to see like an impact of that, or if that's like a to be determined, what that's gonna mean for us here at BC.
So I'll go back to the first question about secondment. So yes, to your point, we've always had a very robust secondment profile for those very reasons. As a kind of mid-sized police agency, it gives more opportunity. So we're still endeavoring to meet those. What we are seeing, and I think I can say this publicly, is that members that are going to some of these secondments are then being recruited by that agency to stay there. The big challenge we have is in municipal policing, there's tenure. So say 5 to 7 years for a special unit. In the RCMP, they generally do not have that. So that's a challenge. So if someone goes, they love what they're doing, they're like, I want to stay here the rest of my career. We can't do that, but the RCMP can. So we've seen that in ERT. So we have no members now at the emergency response team. We're still paying for the service, and we do have members in the pipeline because there's quite a process to get in. But all our members that have gone there have decided, I want to do this for the rest of my career, so I'm passionate about it. So that's a challenge. We lost a dog handler for similar reasons, and also relocate, he moved to the interior. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure. And everyone's looking for advice. We did lose a member to Calgary a few years ago. That was for personal reasons. So we haven't seen any big flow to Calgary yet. But again, it's like, it is a dogfight for members and experienced members, and everyone is trying to put their best foot forward to attract people. Obviously, if you get, in my mind as chief, I would much prefer to build this organization from recruits. They come in, they understand the culture here, and they bring that with them. With experienced officers, sometimes they can bring their own challenges. They've got their own experiences and their own way of doing business. So it's a double-edged sword, but at the same time, you can plug them right in and fix roles in your organization. So we're very, very careful about who we bring in. I'm not going to reduce any standards or just looking for warm bodies to bring in. We're still very, we do have exempt members that we could bring in, but we're just like, I don't think it's going to be a fit here. So we're still looking for top quality people. And maintaining the secondment profile is still important to us as well. Most of them we do fill, but again, when they pop up, sometimes we just can't. Like, I'm not going to deplete public patrol anymore. It's just not fair. And it's certainly, again, it's a double-edged sword. If they're feeling, well, everyone just gets to go where they want and we're running short, they will leave as well. They'll go to an organization where they feel like they're not going to be burned out as much. So it's a high wire act, right?
It's a challenge.
For everybody.
We've actually seen Calgary coming to recruiting fairs here in the Lower Mainland for quite a few years prior to
Okay.
this. Yeah, so it's not unusual to hear
Okay.
that. So yeah.
I mean, this is as like
No,
a
absolutely.
civilian.
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is- I
No,
was-
they've been coming out here for years to different like law enforcement recruiting fairs.
It's
So.
the policing version of Alberta is calling. That campaign.
I never any winter photos. There's always summer photos of Calgary.
Yeah.
So we just counteract that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mary, you want?
No, that was my question,
Okay.
that Kelsey asked my question that I forgot, so thank you.
I have a question just around, how do we track and follow granting opportunities? And some context, I can't give the specific context, but a senior person in another department had mentioned that there are like pools of funding that they didn't think that we were accessing. And I'm just wondering, like, how do we find out about these? I mean, I'm gonna go back and ask that person, but like, how do you find out, or who's in charge? Like, how does that process happen where we're seeing funding opportunities, grants available that we can apply to?
We,
I imagine it's pretty narrow, but
generally for us in the police department, we get grant funding notifications through police services at the province. They'll send information out, whether it's civil forfeiture grants or site funding. There's a new one coming out. I won't I don't know if it's been announced publicly, but there's additional provincial funding coming out again for community safety initiatives. I would say that our staff are very vigilant, and we have probably punched well above our weight in accessing some of these. But if there are other revenue sources, we're happy to have that discussion. There might be other areas that are not necessarily enforcement driven that we might not be aware of, whether
Yeah.
it's, mental health or, that kind of
Yeah, I'm not-
revenue streams.
I'm also just thinking like around, Indigenous reconciliation, that, that might be a non-traditional one, or community engagement, or, there just might be some granting opportunities in those, like less, core policing things.
We're more probably reactive, but just given our staffing
Yeah.
footprint, like we don't have someone dedicated that's out there, a government liaison type person. But certainly, again, some of the staff are
You've done a
pretty
good
good,
job.
like
Yeah.
literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially for some of these kidnapping files. They're on it almost right away, tracking what we're spending.
Yeah.
And
And that was no criticism.
no, I get it. but there's-
It just
we're
was
looking- there's
brought
more.
up that there are other opportunities, so I don't think that staff are seeing them and saying, oh, we're not seeking them out, but just, what we don't know, what we don't know. So I was just curious if there was a process of who's following that account. That's,
We'd be happy to.
I will try to follow up with that person. Talk to me, but. Okay, I think is that it for the budget? Patrick, Alejandro, Heather, good? Okay, subject behavior officer response report.
Can I just ask a quick question before we start this one? I was just confirming that in the agenda, it's called something different than what the report is called, and I just wanted to clarify that I read the right report.
I can do a quick.
Is that,
There's two related reports.
is there?
Yeah, there's the
But
subject
you-
behavior
what this-
officer response report. And then there's the use of force.
Yeah,
report.
like the
They're- the
4.2.
report name's different.
Yeah, I just want
they
to
are
clarify,
related.
4.2 is the report we
Yeah.
have is the right one, right?
Yeah, so under the provincial policing standards for promoting unbiased policing, annually, we are required to report out to the board disaggregated data on.
Yes,
In the standard, it mentions two areas. One is prisoners, like, disaggregated data on prisoners. The other one is on use of force or SBOR reports
Mhm.
or anything. And the third cat is anything the board wants. So if the board says, we'd like you to do a disaggregated study on this area, we can do that. So in January, we brought this forward and this was the one the board wanted, but you're right, the
the name is just off.
agenda is just referring to what the item
Oh,
was.
okay,
But this is basically under. the
okay, thank you.
provincial
I just wanted to clarify I had the right report to read. Thank you, sorry.
I will, do you want to like lead with anything on this, or do you?
No, I would
someone-
suggest if anyone has any questions or areas of clarification, that'd be more helpful. Obviously, a lot of little data points within it, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Answer questions. Any questions or questions on this report?
Do you?
Well, I just thought that. Yeah, I mean, I guess the data would suggest an overrepresentation of particular demographic groups and racialized communities. And also, I understand that there can be a larger context of that, we don't know, are we counting the same person 3 times? Are these folks who may not live in New Westminster, so it might not be a fair or, an accurate comparison to compare these statistics to the overall population demographics in the city. So I understand that there's nuance and complexity. And also I think it's important to name that we've all, at this table acknowledged that there is some level of discrimination and unconscious bias in every institution, including policing. So I would be curious to know, just how, and I don't know that this is, I'm not expecting you to have these answers today, but I think it's always important for us to be aware of what we're doing proactively to make sure that it is a case of the bigger context of the data that we're not understanding in this like one data point, and not due to discrimination or bias. And so, like as a department, what actions are we doing? What education, what conversations are members having so that we just know that we are, you know, whatever the rationale for this overrepresentation is, that we're like always actively trying to, just to like identify and work through, any bias that's there.
I think it was around 2019 when we started doing the fair and impartial policing training. That was also mandated by the province. So from the standpoint of trying to increase bias awareness and also training related to that to hopefully decrease what we do on the front line. But I think, and we've talked about this previously in the past, that the police are downstream of a lot of government and systemic policy-based issues. And unfortunately, these individuals are becoming to our attention in a disproportionate level. And as we've talked about it before, those are very complex and challenging situations to resolve. So, and as you said, it's tough to also untangle, is it a similar one individual multiple times? And that's why it's increasing those numbers. Those are things within our control that we can extricate from the data to give a little bit more clarity to it. But I think it'll be challenging to look at all the different systemic issues, right? We don't necessarily, you know, collect someone's income level or what they're on when we come into contact with them. That's not one of the data points that we take on. So yeah, it's a challenging situation. So
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, this kind of data points came out, and this is largely what resulted in the elimination of street checks. There was a disparity in outcomes racially about street checks, so that led to that. It's something I think we should always be alive to. It's again one data point, so it's difficult to extract, you know, specific information. I think it's to create an awareness. I always tell people as well that in our profession, we police behavior, not necessarily individuals. So when we're reacting to a call, we're reacting to the behavior, and when we're using force, we're generally reacting to what someone else is doing. So this is less of a proactive type situation, you know, as street checks work. Again, though, it's something I think, you know, we should be looking at and be aware of. As we know, certainly Indigenous individuals are vastly overrepresented in the criminal justice system, right from policing to courts to the prison system. I think the reasons behind that are very complex, and they have a lot to do with history of colonialism and socioeconomic standards, and why it is that they're also overrepresented in the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. So all questions, I think, you know, again, when we're talking about one data point that we don't collect, but I think would be interesting is, you know, socioeconomic status. You know, are we over engaged with people in the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum? I would suggest that's probably very true, but it's not something we track. But again, it's something to be aware of. Again, with our footprint, we don't have a huge data analytics procedure. Jeff Scott and Andrew worked in this report. So yeah, one data point, something for us to be aware of. I know the province is very alive to this issue and have mandated a lot of training that our staff are doing, specific around the Indigenous piece, but also just about unconscious bias and just being aware of, you know, when you're out there, when members are out there doing their job, to ensure that they're, again, policing behavior and not people and individuals.
further to that, Tasha, is, you know, last year, all of our members also took the Indigenous culture and history in relation to the context of policing training. All of us had to go through and do it. And a lot of those reasons for overrepresentation in the criminal justice system are highlighted within that too, to help bring awareness to the officers. They talked about generational trauma as well within that. So I think that's helped to give all of our officers a certain baseline of foundation training on why Indigenous peoples are overrepresented within the criminal justice system and within policing. So there's still more work, obviously, we want to do in those areas to learn more, but we're definitely alive to that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think like I appreciate being able to have this really challenging conversation in the like spirit of which I think we're trying to have it, which is really respectful and acknowledging that there's a number of things at play. And also, you know, anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism is really real. And so I just don't want to, I don't want to like explain that away. I want us to, you know, acknowledge that that is true for each and every person at this table. And like, it's a work in progress. It's a lifelong work in progress to be anti-racist. So I appreciate that, hearing more about what's being done. And I think that this is just an ongoing conversation for us to have. Mary?
Just both of you talked about the training that our members receive. And I just wanted to understand the training a little bit further. Is it, or maybe it's a combination of, is it training that we initiate? Is it training that the province requires? Is it how do we determine what training is appropriate when? Specifically related to this kind of digging into historical challenges and current actions?
It's probably a bit of both. Certainly the province has taken a significant lead on this issue, and that's the promoting unbiased policing, mandating certain training courses for us, whether it's domestic violence or cultural sensitivity training. We also engage in that as well ourselves. You know, if we identify a need or an issue, we'll engage with that. The challenge we have obviously is just compressing all this training for our staff. Because there's so many training requirements on them, from the hard skills, training tactics and all that, to investigative skills, interviewing skills, and also, again, just having an understanding. I would have to say that, the individuals that we're hiring now are very much different than the individuals we probably hired when I started. They're very caring, compassionate, understanding individuals. I even see it in my own kids, the conversations that they have about issues that may have been taboo 20 years ago, and it's no big deal for them. And we see that certainly amongst our staff as well. And I think we see that again with the low level of complaints that we have around these issues, HRT complaints, police act complaints around racialized issues. We just don't see a significant number of those. So I'm confident, we're not perfect, but I'm confident that our staff and this organization is on the right track when it comes to that. And recognizing that we always have to kind of keep this front of mind and be looking at it and having those open discussions about it. Certainly if there's an incident that happens as well, to look at it, well, what was at play here? What happened? Why did this happen? And we did.
Thank you. Oh, do you want to add?
To that, Mary, one of the challenges we sometimes have is, for example, with the history of Indigenous peoples and policing, training that was required by the province is that you had to have an accredited curriculum or content by the province first. So that means you always have to draft curriculum and go through that. Being a smaller organization is challenging. We don't have those resources to make this kind of larger curriculum. So in those situations, then we start to rely on and look around to other policing partners, whether it's like Surrey or BPDs, or even outside. I know the Public Health Authority, BCAS, related to, they had one too that was accredited, and we waited for those to get up to speed. And once they were approved and finalized, when we were able to start rolling those out. So just also depends on what the province is going to require for us. We may want to do something, but we need to want to make sure it's going to meet those qualifications or requirements with the province too. So, yeah.
And do we have a plan for training? Like every year, do you discuss what trainings are required or that you want to initiate for the department in that year? Is it?
Yeah, we basically get a large list actually that comes out, and I thought it was in the April package.
I feel like I've seen
Yeah, that's
something
what I thought,
with a
yeah.
list of training.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's significant, like the amount of training that police officers are required to go through is staggering. And that's just the basic, the officer on patrol. You start getting into special areas like major crime, forensic ident. It's significant because, that our industry is a low frequency, high risk industry where we have to put a significant amount of training into something that a member may never have to engage in over a 30-year career. But if they do, we want to make sure that they're doing it the best they can for their safety, obviously, but also for the safety of the community. So it is always challenging. I mean, training, I think if we talk to any police department, is a challenge as far as just cramming as much training in. And we're seeing more and more that's being mandated for us by the province for good reasons. But it just provides challenges as far as getting it all done.
Thank you both. I guess I would just add that maybe when we do our strategic planning, we set aside some time, not obviously to direct, operationalize any kind of training, but to have a conversation about what the baseline training is that we require or or really promote within the department. I think some of this would fall within that sort of area, and I think it's something that could be quite useful in a strategic plan.
I'm cognizant of the fact that when this came in January, Jeff asked us what we would like to see in this report, and now seeing it really like for the first time, I wonder if next year when we get this report again, is it possible to break down like it indicates in the text here that there are different categories that are identified in the SBORs.
Yeah.
Would it be possible in next year's report to break down the categories of force, or is that something that we can't
I
do?
think, sorry, did you say the categories of force?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I'm gonna say, the form's quite long, it has many different categories, and categories
Yeah,
can be
categories.
environmental too, right?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
inside, we're outside, all those kind of different things.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking at just the types of force,
Mhm.
or, yeah, and I think you'll see some of that further down in the
Yeah.
use of force report as well too. But yes,
But I think in the spirit of continuing this conversation, having that disaggregated by
by
the markers that we have
lovely sort
here,
of-
yeah, would be helpful, because yeah, I definitely was interested in that in the next report, and then I think having that overlaid with this data would be useful.
Because you are right, and for example, I think one of the things, maybe I should have highlighted at the beginning there, one key, I think, takeaway from this report is that between this time period, right, 2018, 2024. There was basically 820 entities, basically persons indexed to NWPD files where an SBR was required. During the same time period, you had 130,000 operational files that were generated by us. And only 0.6 of all operational files had some sort of use of force. And further to what you had said, for example, some of these use of force examples could be a display of force, right? Which, don't get me wrong, is still important and can have significant impact on an individual, but also may also be very different from actual use of force on someone. So you don't have that context as well within that number, so.
And just to flag as well, a lot of staff time goes into these reports, like they're detail oriented, like I believe and thanks to Jeff, who's not here, who worked on both of these reports. The second report, the use of force report, took a lot of time and because again, it's data, and sometimes the data, it has to really be looked and drilled down into. So it's not a function that we necessarily have at this point, data analytics. It's something that we're hopefully to work on. But they are very staff intensive reports to dig down into this. Not to say it's not important, but just want to flag that.
Yeah, I appreciate that for sure.
Anybody else on this one? I'm looking over at Heather, I'm looking up at Heather, I keep looking at Haley's computer. Okay, so I think, can someone move receipt for information?
I'll move receipt.
And all in favor? Great. So part 2 of the use of force report. I will open that up.
I'll just give a quick intro if I can. Add.
Sure.
So this is a report that we've been working on for some time. And so every year, we report out to the province about our previous year's use of force. And that's basically a review. Our training section does a review of the SBORs and reports out that data. The data they ask for every year does sometimes change. So you might see some of the data tables have different timeframes and whatnot. It was also, we thought, an opportunity to perhaps just give the board some background on how it is that police use of force is governed in the country and in this province as well. And just referencing the national use of force model, which is probably the national model that everyone but the RCMP used. They have pretty much the identical model. They just call it something different. And then, of course, all the other issues that we have to deal with as far as provincial standards, our internal training, crisis intervention, de-escalation, and all the considerations that go into that. Sometimes I really feel bad for the members. There's so many things that they have to consider every time they're going into an incident, oftentimes with very minimal opportunity. We're almost always being reactive to someone else's behavior. So there's a tremendous framework around member use of force. Sometimes you see the data points rise and fall. But for the most part, I think you've seen kind of a steady use of force. We're seeing a decline probably over the last 10 years in use of batons, use of OC spray, pepper spray, that seems to be going down, even use of CEW. So what that potentially tells me is that crisis de-escalation is certainly a big factor, right? The first use of force that a member's gonna use is just our presence. We're showing up, is that gonna deal with it? And then just our ability to talk. I mean, that's the best tool any police officer has, is their ability to communicate. So just wanted to flag that, and I don't know if Andrew, if you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so, not at this point in time, no. I'll let's see what kind of questions they have.
A couple of questions that jumped out at me. I was just wondering what, and I guess I recognize that I'm asking you to speculate on this data, so with that grain of salt. Yeah, the trends all look relatively unconcerning to me, but I did notice that there seems to be, the one thing that seems to be trending up is firearms being displayed. And I'm just wondering if there's any reason that we can point to for that in particular, and then I have another question for that.
Very hard to say, again, it'd be speculative. I know that particular data point, the number for 2023 was significantly lower than that. And we had to actually go back and dig into the data to get that number, so I really just be speculating.
Yeah,
about why that-
we would have to go through and see each situation and where it happens, start to see where those trends, right? Like, for example, do we have a lot of high-risk vehicle takedowns, right? Maybe where multiple officers are drawing and displaying their firearms while they're arresting these individuals,
And
right?
Would each officer who attends something like that, who draws a firearm, would be one person?
Would be one SPR that they'd have to produce. Yeah.
Okay, that's actually helpful for my understanding.
And file load as well, it continues to creep up, right? And the CSI creeping up. If members are engaged in more files, you might see that number, because it's not necessarily, there's no denominator, just that's the raw number that we have.
Is it okay if I ask that? Yeah. And then just overall, there seemed to be like a bit of a blip or like a trend in 2020 in particular. I was gonna say what was going on that caused this. Obviously, I know that was the year of the pandemic, but I'm just wondering how did that intersect with what we're seeing in the data here? Because it doesn't, like, logically to me, it doesn't necessarily follow that we would see more SBORs. I would have thought more people would have been inside, like not causing trouble, but obviously I'm not a police officer. So I'm just wondering is there anything that we know about what was going on in 2020 that we should be aware of potentially for the future?
Yeah, and it would be very speculative. I mean, the pandemic certainly could have been a reason people were indoors, which means that can be problematic as well sometimes, because they realize how much they don't like each other. We can alter those.
Alcohol was being delivered in 2020, and we didn't like each other.
This is a report that we've only started collecting this data this year. Like, we've been reporting it out to the province every year, but we made the determination. We should start to analyze it and look at it.
Yeah.
Let the board know, let the public also know, in the interest of transparency. So, and again, going back to the whole data analytics thing, it's, I would be looking moving forward if there's spikes, what the reason is for that. I think
Yeah.
also there's a spike in X use of force.
It's some of the individuals who don't follow the law already in COVID may not have been following the law either, right? So people we usually come in contact with are the less law abiding of our community, so.
Yeah, that's fair. That might have been overrepresented
Yeah.
in that year in particular. Anyway, I think that this is great that we're collecting this now, recognizing that it is intensive for staff time. I hope that we use this report to track and analyze. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Yeah, just more of a comment. I appreciate this report, and sort of seeing the numbers and overall seeing how low the numbers are for both, well, displays of whatever was low, but the actual use was very low. Which I think is good public information. Because when you see representation in TV and media, it's always cops show up, you pull out your guns every time. And I think looking at sort of the numbers in the previous report where you referenced, I think 131,000 files, and you look at some of these and we're in single digits for most of these, I think that's a really good news story, really, that it's those other techniques like Paul mentioned, the escalation, because just being there and being present, I think has a tremendous impact. Like a firearm discharge, it's 0,000. That's great. And there's one back in 2019, but like all the numbers are very low, which is really what we would hope to see, I think. And I'd also just like to call it one minor error on page 8. The OC spray graph. 2020, there's an error in the orange. Should be 3.
It's higher than 2.
Higher than 2, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
Totally minor, and I recognize that there was a lot of.
Oh,
Sorry, there's a 2020?
Yeah,
It should
Yeah.
say 3.
It should say 3 instead of 1.
because it's higher than 2.
You think what it's saying there is it was displayed twice and used once.
And the line should.
Yeah, the
down.
one should be down.
Gotcha.
I did ponder over that, I'm like, what's going on here?
You know, it's always interesting when so many people have seen this.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Others. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, to your points, I think it's positive, to see the numbers relatively low. Yeah, so that's good. I would be curious moving forward about understanding sort of why that trend line, as Kelsey mentioned, is going up. Just to better understand, and yeah, for me, 2020, I was like, what is happening? I mean, people were really on edge and struggling in lots of different ways, so I'm sure that translates to all sorts of things. There is a motion to receive this report for information. Second, all in favor, opposed, carried, awesome. And just a verbal update from Patrick.
Thanks, yeah, so I just want to give quick updates to everyone about some of the resolutions that was passed by BCAPB. I'm just recognizing the work going forward the next year in terms of communicating the needs of municipal police boards to the province. So some of the resolutions were related to first entering into a dialogue about staffing destabilization from the constant movement of experienced officers around, going back to some of the themes we talked about earlier. Going back to something Alondra mentioned, urging the province towards bail reform for high-risk offenders as well. Advocating that the province change service and policy complaints in the Police Act to instead say policy and administration complaints to reflect better the actual spirit of what the act's trying to accomplish. It's kind of vague wording as it stands right now. And then some of the things BCAP's already advocated for, but the numbers deem necessary for further advocacy. Increasing annual provincial funding to the JI, implementing a 911 levy on phone bills potentially to help fund ECOM. A new one urging the province to ban the display or brandishing of lighters that resemble firearms in public places. I gather that's an emerging issue, and particularly transit police brought this forward, or the transit police board did, especially on transit. It was funny, but advocate for establishing additional long-term care facilities for those experiencing severe and persistent mental health and or substance use disorders, as well as the last one. So all those resolutions passed. Also changed the BCAP executive. So the former president, Laura Victoria, is done. She did 4 years on a police board and said that's enough. I don't know how anyone does 6. She's not as president. So the former vice president, Michaela Hayes, she's from Victoria. She's taking over as president, and I know her well. She'll be fantastic in that position. Will be well represented. Jim Cambridge from Saanich, who is the former treasurer, is now vice president. Yang Wang of Westman was doing the treasurer position for some time, and he's staying there. Mandy Pata from Abbotsford was formerly secretary. She's stepping down from that and now serving as a member at large on executive committee. And somehow yours truly was elected secretary. So, so I'm now serving on executive committee for BCAPB. So we'll have an additional voice at the table there as well, not just the outer core, but the inner core, which is pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to keep working with the organization and serving on the executive now, and advocating for less there. And that means I'll willingly stay on BCAP, I guess, for a period of time in the future. So that's it for me.
Great. So, I will send the board members a synopsis of the conference. There were definitely, as my first time attending, better parts than others, of the 2 days that I was there. I did appreciate that, Minister Begg was there and actually reported back on the status of all of the resolutions. That does not happen with other resolutions that we send the province. So that was actually very surprising to me that he took out the resolutions and talked about what the work was being done on each of them from last year. I was thinking that, it might be helpful for us to have a standing item on the agenda around this, so I can talk to you, Patrick, just about updates about what's happening at that table, and if we don't need to speak to it, then there's nothing to say, that's great. But let's just sort of have, I think, a better connection with that organization. From your table to here, I think would be beneficial for, for everyone.
The meetings are less frequent, BCAPB, so we'll have to organize when exactly it'll be on the agenda, just
Yeah.
because there'll be some months where there's.
100%,
news,
yeah.
But.
Yeah.
Like this summer, there's no meetings. Which evidently other police boards do too, no meetings in the summer, interestingly.
Where
Maybe,
they,
is that a hint? Is that a-
Yeah,
June, July, August?
yeah, nothing, they take a summer recess. I'm not suggesting we do that, just, it's interesting, we're putting in the extra paper.
I don't know, that's a little, you can talk about it. Okay, that's it. So next meeting, June 17th. And will someone move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor, opposed, carried, excellent. And well, let's just take a 5-minute bio break.